Hello, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this session. So I'd like to welcome Professor Francois Strydom. My apologies, Professor Danpat is having connectivity issues and he's asked me to assist with the chairing. So if I can give a brief introduction to Prof. Strydom. Professor Francois Strydom is currently the Senior Director of Teaching and Learning at University of the Free State. And we've been hearing a lot about the student engagement survey. So we're really looking forward to hearing about that, Prof. Strydom.
Thank you, Randir. It's a privilege to be here. Today, I will be focusing on enabling student success through academic advising and data analytics. Right. Okay, so I'm the presenter for today. This paper was put together with inputs from Gugu Tiroyabone. She's the head of academic advising at the university and as part of the management of the Center for Teaching and Learning. So if we look at just the broader context, I think it's important that one talks about why student success is so important. The graph or the image that you see there is World Bank research that highlights the return on investments of various sectors of education, primary, secondary, and tertiary. So you need to focus on the orange, and you can see there that in sub-Saharan Africa, the return on investment is higher than for all economies, including all high-income economies. So if we look at the left-hand side, our university qualifications are one of the most powerful tools to change the economic prospects of our students, their families, and their communities. Therefore, doing this work is a social justice imperative, but it is hard work because student success is very difficult. If you look at it a little bit from the South African higher education perspective, this is an older cohort analysis by DHET, 2016, where you can see that only 19% of students in the system complete in minimum time, 60% in double the time, and only 64% in 10 years. So helping students to complete timeously so that they get their degree and a better prospects economically is very important. We also see academic advising as being part of helping our students gain access to epistemic knowledge around how higher education works. And that is how academic advising relates to the transformation agenda. So I'll talk a little bit about a brief history of academic advising as I see it, but I'll then go into a fairly in-depth case study into how academic advice has developed at the university. So the catalyst for academic advising's development in South Africa is the South African Survey of Student Engagements. It is one of the first instruments that explicitly started asking questions regarding academic advice. Academic advising is 4 or 5 decades old in the US. It's called something different in the UK. It's also in Australia. But we identified it as a high impact practice. In 2010, the first university joined NACADA, which is the Global Academic Advising Community. That institution was University of the Free State. Pretoria also indicated that they started looking at advising at that time. I'll talk a little bit about the credit overload in professionals when I talk about the Free State case study. Then in 2017-18, things started changing very significantly. We saw DHET emphasizing academic advising, and they also gave us money for a collaborative grant between 7 institutions. We had been working for several years on a professional short learning program to train academic advisors in the country, and we got some inputs from Georgia State for that. and that's helped us to contribute towards the group of people that do academic advice in South Africa. So the first collaborative grant was 7 institutions. We're currently hoping that we can extend that to 14. We've trained about 154 people using the Academic Advising Professional Development Short Learning Program. And then in 2020, we also conceptualized a LETSA. I'll show you what that is in a second. So here you can see many of us know the University Capacity Development Grant focus on student success. Here you can see that student success is student advising is directly seen as one of the pillars of success. A LETSA, you can see the website at the bottom of the slide is the Academic Advising Association for South Africa. It's affiliated to NACADA, and we'll formally launch it in 2021 earlier on the 21st of June. Sorry there, I got confused for a second. So through the national collaborative work, we've been able to define academic advising, and I'll read it to you: an ongoing and intentional teaching and learning practice that empowers the student in their learning and development process to explore, align, and succeed in their personal, academic, and career goals. There's a shared responsibility between the advisor and the advisee. Advising aims to maximize students' potential by facilitating a conceptual understanding, sharing relevant information, and developing a relationship focused on promoting academic success. The envisaged result is that students have a meaningful academic experience while in higher education and feel a sense of belonging to the institution while maximizing their potential for success. So that is how it is defined currently. So I want to go over a bit to the story of the UFS. So as I indicated, just ignore the academic advising cycle for a second. Let me just take you back a little bit. So as we started looking at academic advising as a practice we wanted to implement, from the very beginning, our journey involved data. So the student engagement surveys highlighted academic advising, and we started getting data on that. So from the very beginning, the journey for advising in South Africa has been intertwined with data. That's very different from the US history. And data analytics only became part of advising fairly recently in US history, or advising history. So one of the things I did to highlight the importance of advice is we did a credit overload analysis. So that's an analysis of how many credits the students register for in a year. And I remember creating sort of 7 A4 brown envelopes, and in each one of them I put the registration record of a student in the relevant dean's faculty, so that each of them would have an example. And I remember distinctly, I think the worst case of that year was a student that registered for 420 credits in 1 year. And of course, you will know that 360 is the maximum for an undergraduate degree. I'm not going to reveal the faculty, but that sort of brought the message very clearly that we had a problem. And that also illustrates the power of data in making the argument around why advice is so important. What is very important to mention here, and I'll emphasize it later, is that it's not the data that led the academic advising decision and the commitment to it in the institution. It's the commitment towards creating a sense of belonging and helping our students succeed, and the conceptualization of that journey that led the process. And here you can see it exemplified in the academic advising cycle. In Q1, we have specific areas which we focus on. There's registration, there's planning. Q2, we look at motivation, making sure students are aware of their support resources. In quarter three, it's very important to reflect on semester one, especially for first-year students. They are often demoralized because their performance is not how they expected. And then after that, in quarter four, it moves towards exam preparation and so on. So you can see a lot of topics intertwined in the academic advising life cycle, and I'll speak more about that. So we've had about 10 years of experience in building a system. So our advising system currently consists of 4 different categories of advisors. Peer advisors are tutors, mentors, and tutorials, and there's about 650 of them. Now, it's very important to mention here, they are intentionally trained, and all they do is refer. We don't let senior students advise other students because advising is something which you need to be trained for. But the peer network is a very useful referral network to get, especially the majority of our students at the University of the Free State are first-gen students struggle to go to an advisor because they find them threatening, but a peer is much less threatening. So if a peer tells me, have you been to the advising office? Have you been to student counseling and development? So the second category is within some support services. We've trained student counseling and development colleagues, student affairs colleagues in basic advising skills. Then the faculties over the 10 years have significantly expanded the number of advisors that are employed. And they at the faculties, and they're also trained. And then the central advising office is about 5 people inside the Center for Teaching and Learning that coordinates and runs the system. The curriculum advice takes place at the faculty level and in the central advising office, but the central advising also focuses on success coaching. So what we've been able to build over the 10 years, this is 2020 data, and we've kept impact data consistently for the last decade, is we've developed a web of advising services that scale advising. So what do I mean by that? We have a blend of different types of advising approaches that help to create this web or different nets that help to catch students so they don't fall through the cracks. So we've got online workshops, we've got residential workshops. In 2020, of course, with the pandemic, we had telephonic intervention. Our peer advisors, there you can see the number trained for 2020. Then our compulsory first year seminar module, not model, sorry for that typo. Therein is enrolled 8,310 of our first year students, and they get exposed to basic educational planning, linking it to your career, starting to think about how your qualification links to your career, and those students are exposed to that elements of advising. We did podcasts. The No Student Left Behind initiative I'll talk about in a second. During the pandemic, we developed a emergency remote online learning and teaching response. It had 2 elements. The staff element, what's called #UFS Teach On, and the student was #UFS Learn On. And we developed 9, if you want to call it, magazines that would help students identify resources close to them, being data savvy. How do they study optimally with a device? If they're studying on a cell phone, how do they protect their eyes? Things like that was part, and we created 9 editions of that, and there you can see the platforms we shared it on. 2020, much less individual online, individual advising sessions, and then Facebook, we also use it. So a range of different platforms being used for advising. So advising has developed at the University of the Free State as a hub for holistic student support, and you'll see examples of that. The advising system refers students, helps them to get to the support services that we have, and in that way we enlarge the the impact and the efficiency of all our support services. With first-gen students especially, the challenges that one has is that first-gen students don't know, find the environment overwhelming, and they don't use the resources that are there, and advising helps to channel students more effectively. So have we seen impact? So this is a slide we're very proud of at the University of the Free State. This is the achievement gap over the last decade, and you can see that for all racial groups, success rates have become better. What's for us particularly important is that we're narrowing the achievement gap between Black African students and white students. That narrowing has been very significant in double digits, and advising is not the only high impact practice we've scaled, but it has contributed to that. Some more evidence of how it's contributed. This was the credit overload analysis. You can see this ended in 2013 already, where there was very negligible numbers. Credit overload, I'm happy to say, is something that's very rare at the University of the Free State now. In 2018, we did an analysis of the probability that students would pass 70% of their modules, and the red line that you see here is if you participated in only one advising session, you would already have this compensatory effect, and you would have an advantage over somebody that didn't go to any academic advice. This publication is available on the left-hand side on the Siyaphumelela website. So you can see a history of using data to strengthen advising's case, to make an argument for why the university needs to invest in it, impact data consistently to show how many students are using it. And in 2019, we started conceptualizing a learner case management system, and we developed one. We did give inputs to IDSC to develop one for the sector. That's being continuously refined. So a learner case management system, a student gives consent that their data can be captured. Everybody that works on that system has signed a confidentiality agreement. And of course, especially in the POPIA era, this is legally justified use of personal data because the intention is to help and support, right? And it's also, there's multiple justifications I can ramble off if you would like me to. So we have got an example here in front of us. You can see this is a student record. It records the theme of that advising session. This one was career specific. The student was advised, and then there's a short summary indicating the reason that the student was there. Why do we have this? We have a record then that students have made use of support, but that they, in case the advisors they spoke to is not able to talk to them, and next time it's easy for a colleague to be briefed and pick up the conversation. So you can see this is the sessions we can see, and we can see this is the advisors that have seen the person, so you have a record. And we then draw trend data to see what are the needs that our students have. Now, for this audience, I'm sure it won't be surprising that career advice is the overarching need that our students have. This is not surprising in South Africa, where we know that career advice at school level is highly problematic. That leads to students enrolling in degrees which they're not fully informed about, and then as soon as they do a little bit of the work or they're not successful, they want to change degrees. But they also start thinking and contemplating, what kind of a career do I want once I'm successful? So that dominates. Time management, very significant. Success, study skills. you can see some follow-ups and then just some information. These are the trends we can see from the case management system. So what happened during COVID? So the picture that you see in front of you, I would say is a summary of how we put the student at the center of our hashtag UFS Teach On and UFS Learn On campaigns. When we talk to staff, we said to them, you need to understand that students have intermittent connectivity. You need to design low-tech materials. You must be careful that you don't overload them. And this sort of, I guess, graphic summary was the basis on which we then developed an extensive support system for our staff. We had about 3,200 academics participate in our webinars, which means every academic at the university attended at least 2 or 3 webinars to redesign their materials. As part of the year, you can see our strategies to support student success was Teach On and Learn On. There's a bunch of other strategies which I'm sure UKZN also deployed: digital textbooks, laptops. We created an app to create a VPN for students to access with the website dedicated to their learning, and the university would pay for that data costs then. And we also had some externally funded projects which we developed. I want to talk now a little bit about the No Student Left Behind initiative. But before I get there, I'm sure, as is the case with you, because all of us report to DET now a lot of data. So data analytics was put on steroids during 2020. Our center, because we are the custodian for the Blackboard data, drafted 39 reports, so a report for every week on the engagement of students with the learning management system. What I'm showing you here is actually moving from PDF reports to using the narrative function in Tableau, as it's been explained to me. We have now live reports. This is this past week's one. I'm just giving you sections of it so we can track where the instructors have been on, and we can have comparison trends between 2020 and 21, where the people are accessing the system. We can do the same with students. We can see how often they access and whether they are online. This is a very interesting one. It's a comparison of when instructors versus students are on the system. If you look at the bottom, you can see that our students access the learning management system much more from 12 o'clock to 8 o'clock in the morning, and after office hours from around 8 o'clock, or after office hours, they work late at night. So the data shows us that there's a vulnerability for our students in terms of when they're able to work. And our students give us feedback that it's difficult to work at home. There's a lot of people in the house. It's not quiet. There's a lot of responsibilities. Whereas you can see with the staff data, it's fairly well distributed and a lot more activity during office hours. So that's some of the data. For the No Student Left Behind initiative, we do an analysis to see what number of students are not connecting to Blackboard, because if a student is not able to connect, that student is at risk, right? So it's a proxy for risk. Here you can see how we've distributed per faculty, and we've analyzed the numbers of students that are not connecting, right? So per faculty, you can see the summary here. 72 first-year students have not connected in the last week or not yet in the year, and 52 senior undergraduate students. So those students are immediately referred into the No Student Left Behind initiative. This is coordinated by the Central Advising Office. Those students' numbers are immediately given to the advisors. They phone these students and then they deploy the support that you see in this diagram. So in other words, if a student is having difficulty with connection, they go straight to ICTS. If they have serious problems at home, we have a social worker that evaluates them, student counseling and development, and we can assess where they are, tutorial support and so on. So it immediately responds and students are referred. We also have a vulnerability assessment, and that's algorithmically driven. So a student might say, I'm vulnerable, I want to come back to campus. We collate a list. We look at the narratives that they wrote. We've identified based on our data and linked to the teaching and learning mandate of the university, a flagging system. Students are ranked according to that. There's a central committee that sits every second week, the teaching and learning management group. And students, if they meet the criteria, are then issued with a permit to be able to access campus. That's one of the ways that we're trying to manage that students are not left behind. This is a position we don't want to be in because we would just like everybody to come back, but we have to manage the pandemic in a responsible way. So some concluding thoughts from my side. When it comes to academic advising and data analytics, it's conceptualization first and data second. As you can see, data has always played a very strong role, at least in the University of the Free State's journey. But it doesn't drive advising. The conceptual need that our students, for us at least, are the majority first-gen students. Higher education is a scary place for them when they arrive, and they feel alienated because the University of the Free State is not small. It's got 41,000 students. And connecting with that students and establishing a relationship with them through various forms of advising is our first driver. What analytics helps us with is that the data supports the argument and resource deployment. So it's very much about building a high touch and high tech approach. Analytics has a lot of power in creating a differentiated, individualized support for our students at scale. So by mining the analytics, we can see what we need to push. By looking at trend analyses in the case management system, we can identify what skills to prioritize and what skills development to develop above others. Professional training is absolutely vital if you want to build an advising system in your institution. It's firstly to ensure ethical support of the people that are being advised, but it's also to ensure legally justified use of data. And then the final point is an institution has to move together. The African proverb, if you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. It is about all of us working together, and that includes the students that are being advised. And I will stop there, Chair.
Thank you very much, Francois. Thank you. This was an excellent presentation, truly an inspiring piece of work. In fact, one of the things that really stood out to me was that change in the success rate over the years, those incremental changes that add up to real and persistent change. So with that, I'd like to open the floor to questions. Maybe if I can start there. Could you comment on the economics around this? The costs associated with this level of advising. So this was something I've also engaged with Georgia State with Tim Rennick there, who's I think VP of the Student Success Program. And I was really impressed by this work, and of course it's quite well funded there. And I was wondering, with this level of advising, how the economics played out with the institution.
So our work, initially we identified advising as something to invest in. We started very small, we had one. The main funding for this has been out of the University Capacity Development Grant, but we started very early, already channeling the Teaching Development Grant funds to the initial appointments. The economic argument might sound difficult, but it really isn't that difficult if you can just get started. So I think we've got enough South African evidence, and with the 7 institutions we're currently working with, the qualitative data, there's overwhelming evidence that advising is a worthwhile investment. If you want to talk hard money facts, we did 1 year an analysis, and we saw that our FTE loading of our students had improved because we had a problem. It's been a while since we've done the analysis, that our students weren't taking a full FTE load. Now, you will know that if your FTE load is not full, we're talking about not small change money that you're not getting in terms of subsidy. And at that year, the hypothesis was that the initiative at the university that contributes the best to students registering for all the courses they need to register for, they don't over-enroll, which undermines their success, and that simple calculation for that year contributed to 6 million rand in terms of state subsidy. So I think if you look at the output side of the subsidy, I can quote them. We had them earlier this year in a workshop. We are in regular contact with them. Advising does pay for itself. But I think what's often difficult is decision makers themselves never had the privilege of advising, and they think it's sort of a luxury, but nobody has actually expressed that. I just think for South Africans, because it's not something we're used to, especially now in a massified age of higher education, it's not something which people identify or can identify with at the decision-making level. But the economic rationale is clear. As soon as faculties start seeing the positive impact in terms of the relationship between the students and the faculty, the relationship between the institution and the faculty started funding their own advisors. So our advising forum has now got about 30 advisors in it, and only 5 of them are in CTL. All the other advisors are in the faculties.
That's great. Thanks for that, Francois. That puts things into perspective. If I can go first to the chat, there is a question from Bobby Pargis. Bobby is asking about the various programs at UKZN facing issues of student engagement. So how do you get better student engagement with the support programs available?
Right. So I think the idea that I shared, that advising is the hub, but I want to emphasize the peer advising, and we freely make available our peer advising training manual, so we can share that with you if you want to look at how we handle the training. But I think, Randir, could you help me? How many of your students are first gen?
So I've seen numbers around 7,000 to 8,000 are the new entering first years. I think in 2014, at least that was the case. I think it stays roughly constant around there. Although I'm not sure whether that's just the third year programs. So it might be around 8,000 for the third year programs and maybe 4,000 for fourth year programs.
And as a percentage, what would your guess be? 50%, 60%?
Well, first year will be larger than it should be. I mean, in an ideal world, you would just divide by the number of programs, by the number of years in the program, right?
Yeah.
But in reality, it's higher than that. It's probably more like 40%, something like that.
Right. So the challenge with, you know, in working over the years, I'll give you an example, an international example. A colleague of mine, Vasti Torres from Indiana University, did an analysis, and she found that for Latino students who are a minority, they're underserved in higher education in the United States, students would rather ask a cousin, first generation students, would rather ask a cousin who had failed at higher education for advice than an advisor. And I do think because such a large group of our students come in and they are for the first time in university, anybody, you know, I'm scared that you're going to see that I'm first. I already feel like I had to sacrifice so much to get into this place, and everybody's professor, and there's a dean, and there's a faculty that sounds like a swear word, but it's not, and a department, and there's so many things that are very difficult for students. So using peers as a referral network to say to students, it's okay. It's okay to go to counseling. It's okay to do tutorials, to destigmatize using support. Our UFSS module is incredibly important in helping students develop a growth mindset. I do that lecture every year, and the career advice one. And I got feedback from a student recently how negative they were, and they realized by learning about growth mindset that it's okay to struggle. It means you're getting better. It's okay to receive negative feedback. It sounds like very basic things, but if you're foreign to higher education, and there is a narrative in South Africa that a lot of students don't feel a sense of belonging. And I think it's because we don't think in a nuanced way about creating an environment that meets the student where they are and lets them talk to a person that's not threatening. That doesn't mean all of us in support services are bad and evil. We're not doing anything wrong. It's just finding the right touch point and then having a referral network that refers the student. Sorry, it's a long answer.
No, that's great. These are the important things to think about when implementing a support program. So if I can go over to Rosemary Quilling, please go ahead. Sorry, you're on mute.
Okay, there. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, thanks.
Hi, thanks, Prof. That was a really interesting presentation. I just wanted to go back to when you were first talking about that no student left behind. And I'm not sure if this is emphasis I just heard or if you actually made it, but you were talking about the fact that once you identify those groups of students, and I think it was 72%, as an example, 72% at first year and 52% at the higher undergrad levels, those are referred to the Central Advising Office, and then they are individually phoned. And that's what I wanted to pick up on is sort of, do you have a handle on what numbers are being referred and to these offices and then individually phoned, and then linking that to your comment later about the 30 advisors? Are these the people who are making these phone calls? Because I can see, and I know from my own experience with students as an academic, that personal touch is critical.
So is it okay if I go ahead, Randir?
Please go ahead, Francois.
So Rosemary, just a correction, it's not 72 and 52%. It's 72 first years out of 8,000 and 52 senior students out of 31,000. So
Okay.
these are students that have not connected using Blackboard. So that's the criterion, right? So it's very small numbers, right? So the criterion which we have identified is if you're not able to connect, you can't participate. And and then you are at extreme high risk of not completing the year. And we phone them. So the 5 central advisors phone that number of students. If we need to escalate, we'll draw in some of the 30. But because we can monitor with the Blackboard data who's connecting and who not, we can have different layers of deployment of support, right? So UFSS will help all first years with success skills and academic advice. But those 72 that are not able to connect either need to get a permit to come back to campus so they can be in an infrastructure that allows them to continue, or we need to find another solution to help them. I hope that helps. So it's not 72 and 52%. If it was that, I don't think I would have a job, and we certainly wouldn't be able to phone 20,000 students at a time. So.
Thanks for that, Francois. Maybe can I follow up with, before you got to that point where engagement was actually used as a kind of criterion, of course, you've done correlation checks between the level of engagement on Blackboard and the eventual results and so on. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, before COVID, we haven't actually done those analyses, right? So I can't say to you that I have a correlation. We just, as part of the emergency remote response, said Blackboard is the platform through which you're going to succeed in 2020 and 2021 now as well. If you're not able to engage there, you're not going to make it. So we need to put all the supports in place so you can be there. And if you're there, we need to help you to deal with it. So from 2020 to 2021, we developed open source computer literacy resources. We had like 5 units that started at a very basic level because many of our first years have never had a computer. So we'll do those analyses as they continue. The guide that we've used to see whether we are staying on track around here is we've been looking at dropouts, failures, and overall success rate. So yeah, that's the honest answer to where we are.
Thanks for that, Francois. Okay, so on the chat, Shelley Barnsley asks, is that UFS course credit bearing, and how do you fit it into the curriculum? So I guess that's referring to the support program.
Yeah, UFSS is a 16 credit module. It is in the majority of faculties in addition to students' course load. It was the space for this was created by Professor Jonathan Janssen. There was, as you can imagine, a huge amount of pushback, but we've been doing it now for 10 years, and we validated. It's the most researched module at the University of the Free State with the strongest data analytic evidence of impact. And in some faculties, part of the content is recognized as part of the degree, but mostly it is compulsory for all first-year mainstream students, and in this component of it in the second year of the extended degree, because extended degrees foundational courses also cover some of the elements we cover there. And so if you want to know how it's paid for, students pay class fees for it and funds itself.
Thanks, Francois. Please, let's go to Rashil Raghavji. Maybe while we're waiting for the connection there, there's another question on the chat concerning remote teaching. So during COVID-19, were students still able to keep that contact going with the mentors and so on?
Yeah, it was very interesting. You saw the impact numbers of people or advisors engaging. Our tutors were very innovative in terms of using WhatsApp groups to keep that connection going. We've now structured and we're rolling out Connect Yard at the institution, which is of course a platform that allows you to link Blackboard to WhatsApp and cell phones and so forth. So a lecturer, when they send out an announcement from their course, it will now automatically go into students' cell phones, WhatsApp or cell phone numbers, depending on the preferred communication channel the student selected. So we're busy with that. So there was contact, but less than would be the case if we were not under lockdown.
Thanks, Francois. Rashil, please go ahead.
Hi, Prof. I just have a couple of queries with regard to your data analytics. The first query is, you did mention that students basically sign off saying they're allowing the advisors to use the data to assist them. Is that only for students that seek advisory counsel, or is it for all students at UFS? And the second question is, in your presentation, you had the different times that staff and students access Blackboard. Is it to a more deeper extent with regards to your data analytics, like in terms of what content they access and the depth of them accessing that content? Or is it just things like what time they accessed and for how long and things like that? Thanks for your presentation.
Yeah, I think that we do have a general consent that's signed upon application and registration. However, like all the other universities, I surmise, we are tightening up so that everybody that works with student data is very aware of the justified or the justifications for using data. So we have built in, because we were part of Siyapumelela from the beginning, we were made aware of POPIA very early. So we have built in safeguards for student data, but that's a continuous process of tightening the measures and of training the staff to be able to deal with the data very carefully. In terms of the Blackboard data, we have an analyst that was trained at the Blackboard sort of 21-day database training, so we could see everything and do a lot of analytics. We've not gone the route of buying Blackboard Predict or analytics for Learn. The very simple reason for that is we don't see necessarily the return on investment of those packages. And that goes back to our core assumptions around data analytics. So the phrase that I use when I speak about this is, it's very important that you have a question in search of data and not data in search of a question. I've seen displays and discussions of analytics where you are completely overwhelmed by multiple graphs, something cross-tabulated with this, and there's so many things that it makes the interpretation very difficult. So you would have seen the Tableau report that I put up is very, very simple. So a lot of kissing, keeping it simple, stupid. So because otherwise we find analytics is overwhelming. So we rather would think of what would be the best possible indicator to indicate engagement with students, and we focus on that data point. But as you can see, as we have time and capacity, we then do go deeper to get a deeper understanding. But it's very important for us that the analytical question leads the process, not the data.
Thanks for that, Francois. So in the interest of time, we'll, in a while, I think we'll take just one more question, and then Loiso, if you can provide some contact details if staff would like to further engage with Francois. Thanks.
There are two more questions on the chat session, sorry, Prof.
Yeah, but I think there's time for just the one of those. So on the question, so that Pardon is asking, so is it feasible for academic staff members to be trained? And I guess behind that question is, how much of the advising can be integrated into an academic staff member's workload?
So within the different faculties, there's been different approaches. We've got in some faculties program directors, in other faculties heads of department are chosen and so on. I think there's certain academics you can train in advising. We've made the short learning program only a week, which is very light, but it is a huge amount that we pack into that week. My concern in South Africa, in the US, if you speak to students at Ivy League schools or at most universities, advising is seen as part of the academic role in the US. But there's also support services. Georgia State's success is a result of the appointment of 80 advisors that focus on advising. I'm conservative or careful when I say that can just become part of South African academics' work role. I think there's distinct differences in the capacity levels in our institutions. So we need to think carefully about that. But the short answer is yes, you can train academics. I don't know whether it's all of them, but you can certainly, our faculties have decided we want all the program directors to have this training because they engage with the students when they do advice around the curriculum and so on, and the heads of departments in other spaces. All the faculties decided, listen, our academics are too overwhelmed with just publication, teaching and learning and engagement and administration and leadership. Let's rather create specialists in this field for the faculty. If I can just venture an answer for the systematizing.
Sure.
It's something which we work on continuously. The case management system has helped a massive amount in that, and that it's digital so that people can see, but it's something we work on all the time.
So the reservations on academic staff are clear. I mean, the student staff ratios here are much higher, of course, for one. And I guess the academic industry is the one where you don't get training in one of the core functions, which is the actual teaching, let alone the advising. Okay, then like I say, for further questions and comments, please, Loiso, if you could share an email address there, then if there are further questions and engagement, we can pass that on to Francois. So that just leaves us to say then, thank you so much again, Francois. As I say, a really inspiring piece of work. Thank you very much for taking the time to present today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for attending. And University Teaching and Learning Office will send out more details there. Thank you.